What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
They still haven't. I haven't checked in a while, but we built this thing called Group Watch. And Group Watch Group Watch was this thing we launched during the pandemic that allowed you to watch something on Disney Plus with somebody else that wasn't in your same physical location.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. But you wouldn't have gotten there had you not been thinking about the higher order bit, right? The mission we were on to entertain families with the best stories ever told. Like that was brand power. And when you think of all the things Bob Iger always says, like honor the brand was one of the big messages internally. And so we thought, what are the things we could do that might almost be magical? And people, certainly in tech, people have thought about co-viewing consumption stuff over the years, right? It's been tried a lot, but the masses, and we were out to about 100 million subscribers that were paying us each month. They hadn't seen something like that. That was kind of magical. And so we leaned into it and made it something special. And I just think that trying to anchor on a mission, another very brief example, I was at Univision, Televisa Univision, building out basically what was their Disney Plus Spanish language video streaming. And we started it during the pandemic, but we made it out of the pandemic. And it's interesting because I motivated my team by, and I'm half Mexican, so I connected to this purpose from my grandparents having come from Mexico into the United States in like the 40s or 30s or something, and I remember watching Spanish language TV in their house when I would stay with them, and I got a kick about thinking, what would they have thought if I was bringing this content to the Spanish language audience? And it was more than just bringing the content and telling the stories. I think that's important, but it was more like bringing them their stories. And by the way, this isn't just stories of drug cartels. That's what you learn when you do this stuff. You peel it back, and it's like, what are the stories that make an identity something? And that became our mission. Let's tell our community. Let's give them access to stories about them. And about what's important to them and what's special and what's vibrant and what's unique and what's challenging. And that's what we set out to build, and that's what we built at. We got it to a point where 50 million people were using it every single month, and who would have thought that there was room for one of those, right? Among all of the streaming options that we all have, right?
Yeah, but if you look at this, you have all these options, but out of all the streaming options, most, I'm going off of memory here, but most were pitching technology. That was the thing. Our technology's better. Here's what we can do. We can deliver in this space. I love your North Star. Entertain with the best stories ever told. That's the North Star. And it's more than just a tagline.
Yeah.
It's something that the people can connect to. And then the other part of it had to do with this is that with Univision, you were telling stories, that people could relate to and reminded them about themselves.
That's right.
And so, because as a keynote speaker, I use stories a lot in my messaging. So I was anxious to talk to you. It's like, you're also a storyteller. And what I found is that when I'm delivering a keynote, the reason I use stories is that I was taught, by that, excuse me, I was taught that you make a point for the head and a story for the heart. And if I'm driving a message. And one of my early mentors in this space that I studied with, he said, Mike, he said, when you tell a story, his name is Lou Heckler. I got to give Lou some credit. It's an amazing keynote speaker, and he's my Yoda. But he told me, so stories are like a prism, okay? Where light goes in and refracts. So when you tell the story, in this case, you're in Mexico in Univision, you're sharing a story. Well, it refracts And the people that are watching that story, right, you're going to get a different impact out of it than I will. But it's a message that then resonates to the audience, so it becomes personal and they can connect with it. And to me, the leadership part of it has to do with this is two things. I need to be able to become a master at being able to make points by telling stories about the why of what we do. But something clicked in my mind when you were talking about Univision, is I have to be a better collector of stories about the people who choose to work with me and work for me. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah, because
But you see how this stuff plays out though. Like, I'll tell you something. Like when you're operating this technology, right? Sometimes it goes down. Sometimes there's problems, inevitably, in the middle of a soccer game, in the middle of something special, right? And I made it a point to, whenever we had these outages, and they inevitably happen in the middle, like late at night or on the weekend or something, right? That you have to get people, you have to call people and all of that. And we would all jump on a video conference, and start troubleshooting and figuring it out. But no matter where I was in the world, I always jumped on those and made it a point to be in on it. And it wasn't so much to crack the whip. It was to reinforce. And it wasn't like, let's get the streaming service back up and running or else. It was, let's get the streaming service back up for our audience who needs something to do right
yeah. So it sounds like what you're telling me is you get in the middle of chaos,
now. Yeah.
and then people might argue with me. I don't think they'd win that today, no matter where we are in the world, it's a chaotic situation that we're dealing with. It just, the word I use a lot is uncertainty. It's just uncertain times that we're in. And as leaders, as we're navigating this chaos and we're trying to scale our business, we're trying to do things, is that we need to be in there getting people to refocus on the mission, not the circumstance, but refocus on the mission. As
Right.
I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm not blessed to have served in the military. My dad was a Marine, uh, but I'm just fascinated with this whole mindset of the Navy SEALs, and I read as much as I can about how they can go into unbelievably adverse circumstances. They run into situations, not away from it. And there's one of the premises they work with is called forward thinking focus. Right. And it's not forward thinking like, what am I going to do? Do I shoot the bad guys? What's the mission? How do we keep our focus on the mission? What do we need to do to focus on the mission? Not my comfort, not my circumstance, not my situation. And that's what you were talking about doing when something is causing something to fall apart. It's not focusing on our technology. We're focusing on the way you described, the customer. What's the customer say? How do we stay focused on that? And when you do that, then preferences get moved aside. Silos get broken down
That's right.
because we're coming together to focus on the mission.
Well, and by the way, by showing up, everybody else wants to be there too. Talk about being a part of something.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Nobody wants to miss that. If the boss is there,
That's right.
they want to be there. They want to be seen.
Yeah,
Even in their box in the Zoom, they want to be seen.
they want to because again, it goes back and they want to be part of something, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's what we found. So, the I was looking at some of the things you wrote about in your book, and it's you talk about creating a purpose-driven culture, uh, but it doesn't stop there. That's not where the end of the sentence is. It's create a purpose-driven culture that brings out the best in people. When you think back on what you've experienced as a leader, what have you found as you're scaling in a highly tech, which is a depersonalized environment, right? It's technology has I think, a bad image of being impersonal, and
Mhm.
it's not. It's technology that's being used by people and is being provided by people. So, what did you learn in that, in helping to scale in that area that helps to bring out the best in people?
I'm going to tell you, but I'm also going to say and preface that it's it's got a downside and a trade-off to be considered. So for me, it's been transparency, being transparent with your team, as a leader, transparent in terms of what are we facing that isn't maybe the best news. Um, what is going on behind the scenes in management, upper management, over here, over there, political aspects of things, because that brings a reality to everything as well. So, if a certain leader, in the organization is really hell bent, in my case, on making sure the soccer game never went down because they're very adverse to finding something in social media where somebody's complaining that the soccer game's down. Um, you know, you got to make sure that people understand that chairman or whomever it is, right, has a certain special spot that we must fulfill. And some of it gets political, and some of it, I just had dinner a couple of nights ago with somebody that was on my team at Univision, and he said, you know what, the best thing you did was also probably one of the worst things you could have done, which is be super transparent with the team. He said, because you were transparent with the team, you had an army of people following you every single day. That sounds great, right? Now, the argument is, and the trade-off is, maybe I was too transparent with the team about everything we're facing, and not putting the umbrella up enough.
Mm.
And maybe I enabled, by doing so, and this is interesting, creating an us and them environment, an us being us within my team, and them
Mm-hmm.
being the other people in leadership or other organizations in the company. Because all of a sudden we created this world where we were good and we were better and we were true to ourselves and to each other and to the mission and all of that stuff. Meanwhile, there's people in other departments that are just looking at a bottom line, or just looking
Mm-hmm.
at a political, what does it look like? What's the exposure and the risk look like out in the marketplace? So, I think by being transparent, I may have created some siloing,
Hmm.
which is counterintuitive. And I wonder what you think of that, because it's a dilemma, because, you know, when let's say I go take another operating role at some point, um, my tendency is going to want to be that transparent guy, because
Mm-hmm.
I want to get that army going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's
Well,
that's what.
but here's let's look what we're talking about, because transparency, again, that's another one of those cultural words that are going about right now, and I have a feeling it's going to go to the same place eventually that Deming's quality, the word quality, is used so much it started losing its meaning, so to speak. Um, but I'm a big advocate of transparency, which is mainly data share. Okay, that's what transparency is, data share, and we're dealing in an environment, society wise, culturally wise, economically, of people for the most part. I'm not going to say well educated. They all have Harvard degrees, but because of social media, because of Google, we have information at our fingertips. So the people that are choosing to follow us, uh, they can spot something that's false, fake, or being hidden from 100 yards. And I used to do youth work within our church. And I was warned when I first worked with the group of high school kids. They said, whatever you do, don't try to bluff them. Okay? Don't try to bluff them, because they will spot it from 100 yards away. All right? I was working with one of my clients is a drug and alcohol abuse area, company. And they do amazing, amazing work. And they were telling me about the environment they're in. And it said that people that are dealing with substance issues get their senses get fine tuned, and they can spot weakness, right? And they can spot issues. And so this whole subject of what happens is when we start trying to pull information away where we become false or fake, um, it's really hard to get people committed to doing the extra. And we
Yeah,
spend a whole lot of time with it. I think there's a line that we're talking about with need to know, want to know.
yeah,
All right. And as a leader, is that if we're managing that, then number two, in the way that we share the information based upon the question that you ask, is that how do I share the information in a manner that doesn't make it look like um, we're promoting ourselves and we're taking the emphasis again off of the North Star, right? And where it's about us as opposed about where we're headed. I got to share enough information so that people can see what's going on. What information do they need to get there? Am I just giving information out because they're curious? That's not transparency. Right? Am I giving information that has to do with the substance underneath it? Am I sharing information? You know, you asked me the question, man. I can rant on this one now, but
I love
you
it.
know,
I'm learning.
but it's something you said about Zuckerberg, and I wrote this down, or I'm glad I'm going back to it. What the whole thing about what'd you call that Zuck, not Zuck time, Zuck
Or
your
the
Friday
Zuck
morning
review.
Zuck review, okay? The learning lesson for all of us and what he did with you was he didn't ask the question why one time. He asked the question why, and whatever answer you gave, then he asked again, right? And then he asked again, then he asked again. And then there's a whole learning process right now called the 7 whys. Is you ask why 7 times. Because the real answer is somewhere between 5, 6, and 7. Right? And so I call it peeling the onion. If I'm sharing information I know as a teacher, as a trainer, as a speaker, if I'm delivering information that is, and I'm explaining the why behind what I want you to know, teaching you to do something is easy because now you have something to stick it to. And so I think in that space, as from a transparency standpoint, I think that I can't be afraid to tell you something for how you're going to process it. I got to do the opposite. I got to load you up and help you process it. I think somewhere in that area is where we'll find that line.
Yeah. But also, I think also what you're getting at too is like there still must be a certain level of judgment,
Well, by all means.
right?
Yeah.
That's something too. I just think of all the scenarios where like, when you're building technology, actually the turns out that the emotional side of it, even though the tech for tech's sake can be sterilized to some extent, but the deciding what to build over what period of time becomes very emotional because everybody thinks we need to build this, that, or the other. Somebody else thinks, oh no, but we need to build this. And it gets super emotional super quickly. And when we decide to build X instead of Y, whereas X is what the big boss wants and Y is what the greater team thought we should do for the right reasons, somehow somebody's got to reveal why we're making that choice.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the judgment gets hard because how do you sell it if you don't buy it, right?
Yeah. Or somebody has to tighten the belt up and go sit and have a conversation with the big boss.
Yeah.
And that's giving feedback. I have a project next week I'm doing with a company on the subject of accountability. And part of what I'm building out they're doing some culture shaping in their company to bring accountability more as part of just a key mandate within the company. And part of it is with the survey did, some of the feedback we got is that we wish that the upper leadership teams at times would give us more information, provide more to us.
Yeah.
Right. And the question that I'm going to ask, the exercise we're going to do is, what do you need to do to go get the information? You're putting the weight on their shoulders to give it to you. What are you doing to go in and retrieve it? It's a two-way street along those lines.
Right.
And I don't lose this thought I had because I thought it was really good. I didn't ask you ahead of time. Do you have any kids?
Yeah, I have 2 kids. They're grown kids, but 2 kids.
Great kids. Okay, it's perfect. Boy or girl?
One each.
My name's cool. Okay, I'm going to go to daughter because I got Nikki. All right, and God said, okay, Mike, I'm going to give you one. You're not man enough to have two, so you're a professional. I'm not. I only got one. But there's conversations I have with my 33-year-old daughter today that I didn't have when she was 10. Right?
Mhm.
Because at 10, I had to parse the information I gave her to be able to process whatever it was that she was dealing with, we were dealing with. The way that I helped shepherd her through difficulties was not the way that I shepherd her now. And luckily now I'm sitting in the bleachers. I just watch her run. She's doing great. But we can have conversations that are meaty and that are rich in a totally different manner. And so what you were bringing up is that's where the judgment comes into play. Is that the people we're talking to, we have to be wise stewards of the information exchange. And that's who needs to know, who wants to know. And how do I shape it and package it in a way that they can absorb it and do something with it? I think somewhere in that, if we think of that as we think about dealing with generation of watching somebody who is immature because they're a child. Same adage would be if in the workplace somebody is new in their role. I mean, it's not that they're a child, but they're immature in that role. But within a year, they will be more mature, and they will go from embryo to child to teenage. Hate teenage years; those are radical, right? And that's those are the ones that they're sophomores. They think they know everything, uh, but being able to parse along those lines. Then so. Uh, as always, I just looked at our clock, and unfortunately, we're running out of time again. So,
Oh boy.
which I knew we would. It's when we talked earlier. Like it's been great visiting with you. I want to ask you just kind of as a question. When you think about um, the book, which is Build Something, and for those of you who they jump online, go look at it as an audio version that he's recorded. The ebook is a hard copy. Suggest you take a real hard look at it because it's filled with stories, which helps you to understand the points. But as we close these things out, help our listeners and viewers. Why'd you write the book, and what message do you want people to walk away when they turn the last page?
I wrote it because I identified patterns over time that I thought, and I don't see these patterns in all the books that come out about the frameworks and the this and that. I don't see that stuff. And I thought this needs to be told. And I knew time would tell it whether it matters to enough people or not. But my process of going through that is very worthwhile because I was able to make sense of a lot of things over many years. And I think what it comes down to, it's called Build Something, and it's about building things, building companies and people and teams and all of that culture. But I think one of the messages underlying the whole thing is that unless and until you embark on building something, you will never know everything you could know about yourself.
Mm.
Because you get into these situations where whether the stakes are high, maybe you've raised money and you got venture capital, or maybe you're in a big company with a big bet, or whatever the case is, you don't know what you're made of until you have to go figure something out and build. And that's usually the stakes get higher, and that's when tensions arise and all. I always tell people the building of technology isn't the hard part. It's all the stuff around it that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
The people stuff.
It's the people stuff. That's why they talk about soft skills, people skills. Worst label ever given to something, soft skills.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing soft that has to do with the subject you and I've been talking about then. So,
Not at all.
it's, I suggest, take a look at it. I think the book will speak to you if you will you get your hands on it because, Mike, what you challenged us to do when you talk about build something, in order to build something, we have to learn to become uncomfortable. To be comfortable being uncomfortable. And
Right.
what I love about the journey you take us on is that you give us a roadmap and some things to consider and how to make that happen as we try to scale. So I wish you great success. And if you want to look for ways to get in contact with Mike, we'll pop his LinkedIn connection in the show notes. And I wish you great success in your journey. Thanks a lot for sharing.
You too, Mike. Thanks so much.
And I'd like to say that's a wrap.
All right.
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.